Those of you who are anime savvy will know the work of Studio Ghibli. How could you not? They're Japanese Disney. Up until very recently, it was mostly the work of Hayao Miyazaki that got the limelight. Now, his first film directing was Castle Cagliostro, which was using Lupin III as the main character, and for that reason I wouldn't really call it his work. I mean, the film itself is his work, but they're not his characters. It's not really his story. However, his next film is, and I would say it's possibly the most important work that he's done. Not so much within anime, but within manga, and within storytelling as a whole. Most people will talk about My Neighbor Totoro, they'll talk about Spirited Away, they'll talk about Princess Mononoke. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is probably his best work. Serialized on and off between 1981 and 1994. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is an intense post-apocalyptic epic in which what would now be called biotechnology and various amazing advances have degraded. They've gone into superstition and myth and legend, and you have this amazing sort of muddled up society of humanity pushed to the brink. And it has a bit of everything that Miyazaki is famous for. The background of his world is that humanity has poisoned the earth with their horrible actions and intense warfare. As a result of these ridiculous, insane wars that humanity has pursued, the world has been covered with a gigantic poisonous forest, with hundreds of thousands of weird life forms and insects inhabiting it. This forest and the poisons it extrudes push humanity to the very edges of the landmass. Of course, with land being so scarce, it's an inevitability that war occurs again. Now, what's really interesting about this setting is the fact that you can see the aspects of the society that's been left behind. Now that the world is in this weird, semi-medieval, semi-technological state, you've got societies with 100-year-old aircraft that are kept as their incredible treasures. The whole reason why the Valley of the Wind is conscripted into the army of the Empire is because they have a gunship. They have a little fighter plane with a giant cannon on the front. Like a physical, actual cannon that fires a cannonball. You see later on the ruins of a spaceship which has a mining colony in it because they're just stripping it down. But they consider that their mining profession. They're reusing it to build tools, not knowing that they're inside this giant ship which could take them off this polluted earth. Except it won't now, because it's mostly gone. Strangely, there is the character Yupa who knows about a lot of this stuff, but for the most part, the populace is ignorant. It's quite interesting. You've got this post-apocalyptic world, and they just see things as the way they are. Now in this world, you have Nausicaa, our perfect protagonist, as well as various other people who are her friends, or her enemies who end up becoming her friends, or actual enemies that you don't see if you've only seen the film. Now, Nausicaa is this really interesting character. She is a pacifist to the end, or at least she would be, if she doesn't realise that sometimes she has to do things she doesn't like in order to get the best outcome. I won't really explain that, but let's just say she has some sincere, severe philosophical debates within herself of what the meaning of life really is. Why you should even go on, why you should try and help humanity when humanity only seems to destroy and pollute. It turns out, in the end, she does choose humanity. She does find her reasons, although they aren't the reasons you want to hear. She is matronly and loved by her people. She becomes the chieftain, although she keeps the princess title, but I believe that's more of a social thing that would make sense given Japanese history than it would given the way that monarchies work in the West. Now, with her, we've got a host of other characters. I mean, most obviously in the Allies part, we have Absel, who you see in the film, the last survivor of an industrial society that finds one of the biomechanical creatures that destroyed the world. Honestly, what you see of him in the film is most of what you see of him. He doesn't actually progress that much. He's a pretty bland character. You've got Yupa, who is the older gentleman who is Nausicaa's caretaker. He disappears for a long part of the story. He's off having adventures everywhere with Absel, teaching them about the world. And he does have some amazing moments, but again, he doesn't have much of an arc, because he's at the end of his life. He's an old man. He's already had his character arc. No, much more interesting are the two Imperial characters, Kushana and Kuratawa. Now, Kuratawa is this fantastically complex, slightly cowardly, but also slightly heroic man. He is working class by birth, although given orders by people of a much higher rank than him. And let's just say he goes against them and decides to do the better thing, or at least what he believes to be the better thing. He's strangely competent, while still managing to be a lovable coward. Of course, as far as he's concerned, he's only really interested in surviving. He says, quite interestingly, that the lower classes can only really want survival. They don't really want glory. Which is quite an interesting view of how regular soldiers are in war. The princess that he's in service to, Kushana, is Nausicaa's opposite, or perhaps more like her than dislike her. Like Nausicaa, Kushana is trying to work for what the best that humanity can get is. She's trying to get things to happen, and whereas Nausicaa tries to be a pacifist and stick to her guns in every situation, Kushana knows that sometimes to make an omelette you have to break a few eggs. She accepts that casualties are something that's going to happen. She doesn't like it. She doesn't enjoy it. She mourns her comrades almost constantly, although stoically. She cares for her men. She's trained soldiers up and gains their loyalty immensely because she genuinely cares for them and she genuinely wants them to get the job done. And Nausicaa ends up having to deal with absolutely epic things. She has to deal with the ridiculous things that are the life or death of the world. Kushana deals with the everyday things. She deals with despots. She deals with the war itself. Nausicaa's more concerned, at least her story is more concerned, with the way the world is as a whole. It's more concerned with the ecological effects of everything that's happening. More concerned with what maybe the aims of some of those ecological effects may be, which, as I may have previously stated, might be a little bit unnerving. So, now I've told you a lot about the interesting characters. What else is really good? Well, the art is amazing. It's Hayao Miyazaki. He is really, really good with a pen. Now, unlike a lot of the stuff you normally see by him, as you often see watercolors by him, you see lots of really interesting color art. Of course, it's a manga. It's in black and white. But whereas normally you see block ink and the overuse of screen tones, this work is very much in the details. It's almost like Western inking. There's a lot of very intricate, detailed work here, lots of small, thin lines. And I would put this down to its sporadic publication. Even while it was being serialized, it was monthly, whereas most of the manga we see is the week by week, has to be rushed out straight away sort of thing. Unlike Shonen Jump, Nausicaa is done over time. It's done with a lot of care, and it really, really shows in the art. Some of the characters look a bit simple. Some of them look almost like their faces are straight from Tezuka sort of work. But then they're also a lot more developed. It's kind of in this strange mix between Japanese and American styles. And I think that really works in its favor. If you like the way Miyazaki draws, you're going to like it anyway. But it's consistent with it. And it's something that you don't really see very often. The plot's movement is logical. I'm not going to say it's realistic because it's a fantasy, and it deals with insane biotech and all sorts of quite cool stuff. But it does seem to have a logic behind it, has a logic behind the way that it progresses as a story. It's also fairly long, but it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's something which I would like to see more in manga. It seems to have more of a traditional story progression. So yeah, there you go. I know that this is quite short, but I've got quite a bit of a longer article about this. And it's on my Tumblr. There's a link below in the description. I would really recommend anyone to have a read of the Nausicaa manga. It is fantastic. I really cannot recommend it enough. If you like the work of Hayao Miyazaki, if you like supernatural aspects, if you like interesting sci-fi, if you like planes, if you like strong female characters, if you like a decent story, and if you like to save the world with the amazing giant insects, then you should really, really look into this. It's got some really interesting questions to ask. It delves into some quite deep areas of philosophy. It deals with the fact that if you are a pacifist, you have to reconcile certain things if you want to have the best from humanity. And it's really affected me quite a bit. As I've said, I've written a lot more about this, and there will be a link below in the description if you want to read about more of my thoughts. Till then, I'll see you later. Ta-ra!